Okay, welcome to this screencast on cell structure and function. So we are going to be comparing the center of this slide here, all of these different organelles. So here's a plant cell, here's an animal cell, and you can see that they both share many of the same organelles. So we're going to learn what each of these organelles does. First, let's go through and see how you're going to complete this screencast. So first, take notes along the way in your notebook. Now, you should copy some of these things down. You will be tested on them, and you'll have to know them, convert many of them. Not so much to memory for memory's sake, but to use as building blocks to understand the labs that we're going to do quite a bit better. So you can stop the screencast at any point to copy the notes or to review the concepts, and then of course replay as needed. So let's get started. So as we're considering cells, let's first of all consider just humans. We spent a whole chapter learning humans. So what must humans do to survive? I came up with 6. I'm sure there's many more depending upon how you organized them. And we'll just take all of them here at once. So they need to take in nutrition. They need to get rid of solid and liquid waste. They need to get rid of carbon dioxide, or CO2, which is gas waste. They need to reproduce, okay, or the species will die out. We need to burn nutrients for warmth and also to get energies so that we can move. And then ultimately we have to protect ourselves from the outside environment. Okay, so if we look, do individual cells, so the amoebas that we've looked at in class, or the paramecium, or even our individual cheek cells, do they have the exact same requirements? Well, the answer is yes. All of the same apply. Okay, individual cells have to take in nutrition. They have to get rid of solid and liquid waste. They have to get rid of gas waste. They will reproduce. They'll burn nutrients to get energy and to stay warm, as well as protect themselves from the outside environment. So let's compare the cell to a factory. So here's a factory, okay? So here's our general factory, and let's just get an overview real quick of our factory. So we have a little of an assembly line here that we're creating. So let's go back to the beginning. So you have, a factory essentially is converting raw materials into some form of product. Maybe it's a cell phone, maybe it's a car, it doesn't really matter. But we have plastics, metals, paper, and people that are transported into the factory. Then on the assembly line, the materials are made into things. Then after the assembly line, they go to packaging. Then after they're packaged, then they get shipped out of the cell. Okay, well, there's 2 other things down here that we haven't been focusing on. We have a control center, which is, the control center is not only it's determining what can come into the cell, and hold on, let's see if I can be, let's just get rid of this guy. So anyway, here's the control center, and the control center is going to determine what has the ability to come into the cell, what the assembly line is making out of it, how they're packaging it, and then ultimately how they ship it. So the control center, as you can see here, the pink lines, does many different things. Now the power plant provides energy to the whole process. You need a power in the control center. You need power in packaging. You need power in the assembly line. You need power or energy, and here in the form of gasoline, to ship things out of the factory. So let's now branch out from the end here, and so here's the whole thing: raw materials in, through the assembly line, through packaging, down to until it's shipped out of the factory. Now down here is the cell. So let's see how this compares to the cell. So as we scroll down here, you're going to see that for the cell, we have to get raw materials in as well. We have to get carbohydrates, proteins, fats, signals, and gases, in this case oxygen or O2, into the cell. Okay, then we have something here that's very similar to the assembly line. It's what makes the proteins and makes fat right here. This is we call this the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so from the endoplasmic reticulum then, we move on to the Golgi, this is the Golgi apparatus, and the Golgi body here prepares, a little bit of a typo here, let's fix that real quick. The Golgi body prepares products for export. So again, after they're made in the factory, which is your assembly line, the endoplasmic reticulum, it goes to the Golgi apparatus, and then those are then shipped out through vesicles, which are tiny packages, vesicles for shipment out of the cell. So just like in the factory, though, we have to have a control center, and we have to have something that's going to provide energy for all of this. So that's these two here. Here's the nucleus. The nucleus contains the DNA that controls the whole cell. So this is the control center. It tells what can come into the cell ultimately, what's going to be made on the assembly line or the endoplasmic reticulum, how are things going to be packaged or processed, and then ultimately where do they get shipped to. Okay, now here is the mitochondria. Many mitochondria are one mitochondrion, and it makes the energy for the cell. It makes something called ATP, which is a form of energy that the cell can use. So it gives energy to the vesicles to move around, gives energy to the Golgi body here, or the Golgi apparatus, energy to the endoplasmic reticulum for so that the assembly line can work correctly, and then ultimately, even on the outside of the cell, there's some energy needed to bring things into the cell. So again, if we go all the way back out and we compare both of them, hopefully you can see the similarities between a factory and one individual cell. So we're going to continue this comparison as we go through with each individual organelle. Okay, so humans are made up of organs. They're large structures that make up body systems, and an organelle is a smaller kind of organ that's only found in cells. Okay, so the first one, if you look over here on this kind of pink or purplish box, we have the factory. So these are all the things that you'll find in the factory. Up to the top here, you have the cell organelle equivalent. So the two are compared, saying they're similar. The function is what the organelle does, and the structure is what it looks like, essentially, in the cell. So the first one is the nucleus, which, as we learned, it contains DNA, which directs the cell's movement. Okay, and that's what it looks like. Okay, you can see the DNA coiled up in here. The power plant we call the mitochondria, many of them, or one mitochondrion, and the function is it converts food or nutrients into usable energy for the cell. And that's what it looks like. It's got these folds on the inside. It's often drawn in an orange color. The assembly line is the endoplasmic reticulum, which is called the ER. And there's actually two of them, the rough ER and the smooth ER. More on that in a second. So here's the function. It produces proteins or fats to be used or exported out of the cell. So maybe the endoplasmic reticulum makes proteins to be used by the cell, or maybe it makes things that it's going to send out of the cell. And that's what it looks like. It's got all these little folds and kind of protrusions. It's kind of a reminds me of like plastic wrap or something like that. Here is, or bubble wrap, I guess is what I meant to say. Here's the packaging. And this is the Golgi apparatus. Apparatus is kind of changing the word now to body, so you see both Golgi apparatus and Golgi body. I think the word apparatus is pretty funny, so we're going to go with that one. Packages proteins and fats to leave the cell, and attaches carbohydrates. So hopefully remember these proteins, fats, and carbohydrates from when we learned about nutrition. They are just things that are essentially, on a basic level, things that we eat. They're nutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So, and that's what it looks like. Also, kind of like bubble wrap, bunch of different bubbles in a line. And so, again, as things, the nucleus is directing the assembly line here what to make, and the Golgi is what's doing the packaging. Okay. So let's move on. Um, the individual packages with the products, that's going to be the vesicles. Individual tiny parts of the Golgi, and they contain the products of the cell that are being exported. And so the structure looks like that. If we zoom in on this one, you're going to be able to see how things actually look. So here you have the Golgi vesicle, and these tiny ones are the vesicles. Here is the outside of the cell, and here's the Golgi apparatus. Okay, so let's continue. The walls of the factory would be the equivalent of the cell wall. Cell wall is really only found in bacteria and plants. It's not found in humans or other animals. That's why we're squishy. Okay, the cell wall makes trees and gives them that sort of hard textures. They're cell walls. So it's a tough outer layer that provides structural support and protects the cell from the environment. So and this is what the cell wall looks like. It's this green section here. You can see where there's the edge of 3 different cells coming together. So let's learn about these last 2. Okay, we have the air within the factory, or everything else besides the machinery we're calling the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm is the jelly that all the organelles are floating in, and mostly made up of water. Now the window screens, this is a very important structure. The window screens in a factory are equivalent to the plasma membrane in a cell, meaning that they're a barrier between the cell and the environment, and it allows some things to enter and to leave. So some things are forced to stay in, but some can pass through to the outside and as well as on the inside. So let's see what each of these look like here. As we scroll down here, you're going to see there's the cytoplasm. All this blue stuff is the cytoplasm. Everything else are organelles. So it's best to describe the cytoplasm as what it's not. It's not an organelle. It's everything else but the organelles. It's sort of if you threw all the organelles or all the machines of the factory in a swimming pool, the water of the swimming pool would be the cytoplasm. So here, this is actually of a bacteria. And if you look up to the top there, you're going to see the bacteria have a cell wall, but then they also have a plasma membrane. So I just wanted to show that everything has a plasma membrane, whether it's a plant, animal, or bacteria. So let's scroll out here and get the large view. So here's everything. So go ahead and pause if you need to, and we're going to move on. So here is 2 more that I put these next ones in green, just because really. But the next one is the equivalent of solar panels in the factory, which is going to be the chloroplast. And the function of the chloroplast is to convert light energy into sugar and other materials. The structure looks like that. Okay, it's green. That's why plants are green. So it's important to note that animal cells do not contain chloroplasts. They're only found in some protists and plants. So then we have these other thing in the factory called protein machines. They are the equivalent of ribosomes, okay? And their function, they are proteins that make other proteins. Okay, a machine that makes another machine. You could think of like a big machine that's going to make, say, a cell phone. Okay, and that's what they look like. So these are actually 2 different halves of a protein together that make up one ribosome. Let's go ahead and zoom in here in case you want a closer look. So you can pause it if you want to look over each of them. Okay, so here's the chloroplast, and here is the ribosome.